Next up, another Yosa Buson. This one goes, light of the moon moves west. Flowers, shadows creep eastward.
Mm.
Light of the moon.
Again, I feel like very kind of self-explanatory. You know, the moon is moving west.
Yeah.
Shadows extending to the east as that happens.
As that happens.
It's very like balanced. Of course, it kind of puts you in the middle of the two. Like balance of nature, you're between the moon and the flowers.
I guess the question is, which season is it supposed to be?
Well, there's flowers, so
There's flowers.
More likely to be like a spring or summer than fall or winter, I would say. Not that there's not any flowers.
There's no flowers
in other parts of the year, but
0 flowers, all right?
I like also, this kind of gives me similar vibes to the last one of like a really bright summer night, because it's light of the moon, not the sun, and like for the moon to be so bright that it's leaving shadows, you know, like it makes the flowers leave shadows. That is that's a bright night.
That's a bright night.
No clouds there.
That's one bright night. Oh geez.
It's giving me like 4th of July, like hanging out outside with the family. You know,
Yeah,
sort of
like camping.
Yeah.
Vibes.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing in Japan, there is a thing when there's the full moon and the moon is bright, you eat a certain type of sushi. Not sushi, but like, like a makia roll. And they call them, I mean, well, it's like a moon, like, what is the word? Moon eats, like, like you eat food when there's this kind of moon, eat that type of food. And it's supposed to represent longevity. And I forgot what's in the roll. It's like some tuna, some kind of mix. But like it's all food that's related to like long life.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of like watching time go by slowly.
Because I guess like they are getting longer as the moon is coming down. And I guess all the homies are just eating their sushis, looking at flowers, like, yo, what's good? Beyond that, I don't know what the symbol would be, but a part of me really wants to like dig into the West versus East thing.
Yeah.
Let's see, what era is this? 1716 Japan.
That is a good point. So if like the
shadow. It is Edo. So the country's closed at this time. Hey.
Completely?
Yeah. I mean, it would only people that came to Japan at this time were the Dutch, the Portuguese, and they gave tulips and like, sometimes guns. But
could have been tulips.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Like maybe the moon, the moon goes to the west and then brings flowers, right? And then
okay. And they creep like here comes the tulips.
Tulips creep east.
The creep east, they're like, here come the tulips. And I was like, oh my god, no.
Sounds like a secret spy code, like the priest creep east in the moonlight.
Actually, yeah, it's like this is how they killed like the emperor.
Flower shadows creeping east.
It made me think of Taoism, just like being in the middle path, right? Like between two extremes. And it's kind of like these two things kind of reaching away. So he's kind of in the middle. I
can see that, especially because the moon. I mean, I guess in Buddhism, that's where gods are, right? Even though Buddhism doesn't have gods, but like I think that's where like the Buddha is, the moon, right? So I guess the your read actually is pretty on point.
Because it's like light and shadow.
I mean, it could be a reference to Buddhism creeping into Japan, and people following it, and some people restraining from it. Well, not restraining. What is the word? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Refraining. Yeah, that's an interesting read. That could work. That's pretty cool. And yeah, they be creeping, let me tell you.
Oh, they be creeping.
These flower shadows, bro. Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
So creepy.
They are creepy. Yeah, it's just one of those things, man. Like when it comes to Japan, like the symbolism, they love their freaking symbolism, and it means like 20 different things. It's difficult to get it off the bat, but I think that read is the closest. If you want to, take it out of the context of just flowers and the moon.
Yeah, and there's always many readings. I mean, it's hard to get symbols in the culture you are from. Like, never found another one.
That's such a good point.
Mhm.
Which makes me wonder. Like, I feel like English symbolism is usually pretty transparent. Like, I wonder if that's just because of the wide exposure people get to the culture, so people just generally have an idea what they're talking about, or is it a part of literature, just like we had Hamlet and Shakespeare, right? Where things were actually designed for the average person to understand and appreciate. Well, I'm not sure if haikus were designed for anyone to understand or appreciate. I don't think anyone besides this guy understands what he's talking about.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of a combo of a lot of things. Like most, or I shouldn't say most, the basics of English symbolism are based on nature, which I think is true for most cultures. Like that's where everyone came from, nature. Like the sun typically means goodness and light and like happiness, because the sun was when it was safe to go outside, and the moon is typically kind of like the darker side of things. Because it was dangerous to go outside when it's dark, and then you kind of get the duality of black is evil and white is good and pure, and light and dark always duality. That's almost true in all the books that I've read.
Yeah. No one's like, hell yeah, the night came and then we were happy. Nope.
Yeah. And like red is typically war or whatever, because red is blood, so like it comes from a very logical place. But then you go on further, and like in the Victorian era in England, every flower had different language. So when you read, or different meanings. So when you read a book from around that time, like someone will be like, and then I gave her a bouquet of foxgloves, and you're like, okay.
All right, cool. All right. Was that the cheap one at the store that day? Like, was that?
But that's like a very specific meaning, and if you research it, it'll tell you what that actually meant, and it's like, ooh, scandal.
Scandal.
Yeah, so it's hard, but I think you can sometimes figure it out. Like, sometimes, summer, we can pretty much guess that like the summer river in the first one is like happiness, because summer is easy, and you find food, so it's happy and stuff like that. Winter is typically the opposite, because it's harder to eat and it's cold.
Yeah, scarcity.
Sucks. Winter sucks.
Sucks for everybody.
Yep, everyone agrees with that one, dude. Everyone agrees. There's some good points of winter, but generally it sucks.
Worst season for sure.
Yeah, honestly, out of all the seasons, not gonna lie, winter kind of is whack. Winter gotta step it up. Summer also kind of whack. But yeah, which is why if you're gonna write something, keep your symbolism nature focused. If you bring in fossils and everything, we will hate you. Take note of that. Anyway. Yeah.
Hot take.
That's my hot take for today. I'm not gonna lie, bro. Not gonna lie.
Nature.
If I don't know what you're talking about.
Simple stuff is good. It's effective. And then so I think like most people get it at least on a subconscious level, if not consciously. That's why
you mean like nature?
Yeah. So at the end of the Lion King, in the big fight, it's raining. You don't need to know that rain symbolizes struggle. You feel the struggle and sadness because it's raining, and raining makes you feel sad. Like that's yeah.
Yep.
You don't have to like be a genius to like understand it, because you don't even have to understand it. You just get it instantly, which is kind of cool.
Right.
Which is nice. But yeah, I do think so. It's that, and then also just English literature is pervasive, and people are exposed to that all over the world, for better and for worse. But
it is interesting to me, like it is the basis of English literature, like obviously nature symbolisms, but over time it does seem like it moved away from it significantly, because like now it became, I don't want to say, not that I'm a well-read person that knows what he's talking about, but like I feel like it moved away from it to the extent, like if we're going to compare it to Japanese literature, Japan stayed there up until today. They're still talking about plants, animals, and bugs. Like, English moved away from that a long time ago, I feel, even though it does come up here and there, it's not the main focus.
Mm.
Well, Japan has this like kind of proverbial style to literature, which even modern books, like, it is a huge part of what they write about. Like simple things that happen every day, and you're like, yeah, I know the sun came up, bro. Like, you don't tell me like it's 8 a.m. Like, yeah, the sun's up, But they find it necessary to mention every time, which I don't know what to speculate from that, but like, I guess there's the whole English literature did move on to more philosophical questions that are less human focused and more abstract.
Yeah, you know what I was just thinking, because you're right. A lot of the time, the symbols that are like really cool to look at now, or like in more modern English literature, are clothing and like physical on the person. So like in Catcher in the Rye, you can watch as he takes on and off his hat. And when he has it on, he's kind of like playing more of a tough guy, bravado figure. And when he takes it off, he kind of gets more real and like tells people how he's really feeling. And he just does it naturally, but it's kind of cool to watch. There's lots of symbolism in hair that's huge. Like when people cut their hair, you can look at Rapunzel. Cutting her hair is a very big symbol of like freedom and moving on. You could say that about Mulan as well. I know it's a Chinese story, but it's an American movie. Cutting the hair. It's a lot of it in clothing. So a lot of it is like on the person. And I know that the Western culture is very individual as opposed to Japan, which is more like community, and nature affects everybody in the general vicinity. I wonder if that could be part of it, like a focus on the self as opposed to everybody else.
That would make a lot of sense, frankly. Especially since like even the philosophy of the West is so focused on individual mental state, abstract thought, what's my life about. While even though obviously the East is not lacking in those forms, but they don't have the literary history that West has. And in their history, they're just like, yo, what about these plants though? Like when that is your literary history, it's kind of hard to diverge from that as like a culture,
Yeah.
And no, that's an interesting point, absolutely. And I guess like just the beauty of the Japanese literature is just the fact that they don't dive into this. Well, West, has modernized their way of thinking. As you said, like clothes became such a huge indicator of character development. I don't think Japan is not necessarily, not doing that, but it definitely is so few and far between that like the main focus is never on the main person, except for more very, very modern stories like up until 1900s. I don't know any examples of someone that wrote the story that is that focused in every single detail of a person rather than everything that's happening around the person,
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I see that even in like the movies. Like if you look at Miyazaki films, really they frustrated me because they felt very like disconnected and kind of unstructured. And I was like, what is this even about? Like stuff is just happening. But that's the point actually. And I was just completely it's just like typically, slice of life in a way. Like this is this girl's day, and this is what happened today. And it's a really different way of storytelling, but it's really cool to see.
Actually, I love that you brought it up because like I literally thought about that last week because I've been living in Japan for 2-something years now, and now when I watch a Japanese movie, I get it. I used to not get anything, but even though I'm not spending any like active thought on trying to understand it, now the stories just make sense. Just because I guess it's living in Japan, like you absorb that way of looking at things, that way of thinking about things. Like Totoro, for example, is an absolute mess. If you look at it from a Western style, like what is going on? Like, and then you start speculating, like, did the girl die? The girl didn't die. But like now when I watched Totoro again like a couple weeks ago, and I'm looking at it like, oh yeah, all right. Like as you said, like it's literally just a slice of life. If you try to create a start and finish to the story, it's nothing more than simply that slice. What happens after is not for us to speculate. What happened before is like, yeah, if they tell you. And it's very, what do you say, impression focused. It's just trying to make an impression on you. It's not trying to tell you this hero's journey, story, blah blah, even though there are those examples too. But yeah, no, I like that you brought it up. Japanese stories like that kind of stuff. Which, you know.
You said impressionism because it is kind of like impressionism art, and also like, you know, Japanese what do they call it, like the really simple ink drawings, you know, how they'll draw like a fish in one stroke. Yeah, like that was happening far before the Western world caught up with like water lilies and stuff.
Right.
You know, like they were like, nah, dude, you don't have to do every detail of a fish. Like, that's a fish.
Yep. There's like that minimalist culture, which, you know, it's funny. Again, I was looking at this, I think 2 days ago. I was curious, you know, I was curious about shorthand in Japanese, which I want to make a video about. Because, like, how do you shorthand a language that has characters, you know, like that has like Chinese, for example? And what you said, it comes from the same culture of condensing these characters together in a short way to express the same meaning. So like you put like 4 characters, you put them together into one simple looking one. And, you know, same obviously brushed off on Japanese, and then they create a shorthand for like, you know, more official stuff, more court readings and everything, you know. And I guess just because of the nature of the language, and I don't know if what I'm gonna get into, like, you know, the reasons of why language developed that way, but because of their language, yes, there is that way of looking at things. There is that way of having to minimalize things because it's so impractical to do it any other way. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. Y'all should thank the Romans for giving y'all a healthy alphabet that you can actually use. Romans hooked y'all up, not gonna lie. These guys got screwed by China. This language is messed up.
I was also thinking about symbolism, like even in the Iliad, like there's that shiny helmet, you know, always stands out. So even then, like, you know, it was more focused on those elements of like the costuming and like the like who's got what weapon and
the Iliad. I mean, the Iliad's very character focused. You know, they're very important, like people. I don't know what I was gonna say.
Yeah, so they're pretty important people.
Yeah, it's not really about the zoomed out view, the Iliad. It's really like close.
Actually, yeah, it's very intimate for a war story.
Yeah.
Like, what? How do you say? I guess like to the extent to which the translation conveyed it, I was entirely like you were picking teams, but like it felt like watching sports, and my favorite guy is like out there, like, yo, all right, go for it, you know, like.
Well, there is also, I mean, the Iliad does also focus like smaller focus. It's like, here's Achilles, here's the story of Achilles, and then it's like, here's like one sentence about all these other people that die.
There's a cloud of blood, and it's like, oh yeah, that was that.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people dying.
To be fair, when we read it, we did also like skip over big chunks of like, here's the list of like everyone who's on a ship and going to war for this.
Yo.
Yeah.
I mean, clear indication that we also did not care. Like, the Iliad got us. They knew what we were trying to do.
So just like there was that big picture scope, and like we skimmed through it.
Yeah, we scooped it out. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm glad we did. I don't remember a single.
Not to say that anything was wrong with that.
Yeah. But again, it goes to show, like, you know, these character stories come from a long history.
Yes.
We've been obsessed with this for whatever reason for a very long time. Which, you know, I don't know the reason. I'm not a historian. I'm not well read, so.
I mean, I do think it's simply culture. Like, I mean, as far back as you go. I mean, I know that I said that it's gotten more specific lately, but like Shakespeare was not really worried about what nature was up to. You know,
they didn't care.
Very focused on himself. They're all focused on themselves, and it's just kind of a Western view, is looking inward. I think the opposite is kind of true for Japan, it seems.
It is kind of funny because, like, in the last, I guess, decade or so, you know, Buddhism, meditation, all this kind of stuff really caught up in America.
Yeah.
And it's all supposed to be like looking inside kind of thing. And it's kind of funny where it caught up in a different way in America than it did, obviously, you know, it's been here for a while, but, you know, than it did in the East, which self-reflection has different perspective. Like, how do you say it? Has different styles. You would think self-reflection, self-actualization is just one straight path, but it actually divides into two when it reached the West. Because the West thought as like, I'm going to use meditation, I'm going to use Buddhism to reach my own potential, to do great things with my company. While here it's like, I'm going to use, I want to say here because Japan's a godless place. But let's say in China, like no, it's a fact. But like in China, for example, like it is used as a way of building community, as a way of getting closer with your peers and accepting your mortality. While in the West, it's like, I'm gonna be greatest CEO ever. I'm gonna meditate at 4 a.m., then work out and then lift weights and drink protein. It's like that's not what it's about. Yeah. But it just got misinterpreted in that way. The divide between East and West we can talk probably about for years, but I don't know if you have the memory capacity on your laptop for us to discuss it.
Unfortunately, have to stop. But if you this discussion and you want us to talk about more, we've got endless haiku. So give us
actually, we got a lot of haiku.
Comment your favorite haiku.
Let us know what you think about the moon and its path west. How that affects those shadows heading east.
Yeah, you like shadows, flowers? Let us know. Foxgloves.
Subscribe if you like shadows and foxgloves.
Do you know what foxgloves are? You should definitely subscribe.